With the arrival of 1940, the war in Europe intensified with Hitler's troops spreading terror. A fundraising patriotic carnival kicked off the 1940 Rugby League year. Among the guests that day were the pioneers Alec Burton and the great Dally Messenger. The interstate clashes of 1940 continued under difficulties. A try here to the brilliant winger Eric Harris. Eastern Suburbs, minus an injured captain-coach Dave Brown, who had come home after 4 seasons in England, fought out the premiership final of 1940 with Canterbury. Led by Ray Steer, the Tricolours outclassed Canterbury to win 24-14. May 1941, and 500 German planes dropped hundreds of high-explosive bombs on London. 7 months later, the US was drawn into the war after the Japanese strike on Pearl Harbor. Soon afterwards, the Australian mainland itself came under attack as 180 Japanese planes delivered death and destruction to Darwin. War came to Sydney when 3 Japanese submarines breached the harbour. Their target was the US cruiser Chicago, but a stray torpedo hit the barrack ship Cuttable, killing 18 Navy men. Following the 1941 New South Wales series win over Queensland, interstate football was put on hold for the duration of the war. St George won their first-grade title in 1941, downing East's 31-14 in the final. In Newcastle, a youngster named Clive Churchill was making a name for himself playing for Morris Brothers New Hamilton. Canterbury, the team in stripes, here in action against Newtown, were the champions of 1942, winning a waterlogged grand final against St George 11-9. During the war, those at home sought relief from the conflict as best they could. Sydney's Trocadero was the dance mecca. Bob Dyer's program, Can You Take It?, kept Australia laughing. Jack Davey was enormously popular with the stay-at-homes. So too were the live Lux radio plays. In Rugby League, the show went on. Enlisted players got to represent the services in matches against the rest. At 1:45 on Grand Final Day 1943, the SCG gates were closed as a huge crowd besieged the ground. Bumper Farrell's Newtown Blue Bags showed their wares spectacularly, running in 8 tries to 1 to down North Sydney 34-7. North's captain-coach that day was Frank Hyde, who recalls the extraordinary hunger for football during the war.
But then, of course, they broke down the gates, and I think there were the best part of 70,000 there, and people in uniform were allowed in free, and there were raceless Saturdays too, which helped the football crowds along.
At the movies, Casablanca with Bogey and Bergman was a big hit. The war drew closer and closer to home. Battles raged in Singapore and in the jungles of New Guinea. Film star Gary Cooper visited the troops, and the poker-faced Jack Benny took his violin to the waterfront. The season of 44 produced a football scandal, an accusation that Newtown had thrown the final against Balmain to ensure a second gate for the grand final. Balmain won 1916, but Newtown strenuously denied the charges, and events the following week backed them up when the Tigers won the grand final 12-8. By 1945, the war clouds at last were lifting. The Allied forces were liberating European cities. In May, Germany made an unconditional surrender. The Japanese capitulated 3 months later. At the end of it all, the troops came home, and a united and deliriously happy Australia celebrated as never before. The newly appointed Governor-General, the Duke of Gloucester, was on hand for the resumption of the Interstate Football Series. Norm Jacobson races in for a try as New South Wales win 37-12. In 1945, a sensational allegation from St George front rower Bill McRitchie that Newtown's Frank Bumper Farrell had bitten his ear in a match. A long investigation by the league cleared Farrell. That year's premiership belonged to Eastern Suburbs, triumphant in a fluctuating and exciting final 22-18 over Balmain. Man of the match, Dick Dunn, scored 19 of East's points, with 3 tries and 5 goals.
I was a lock man those days, and I had Lyle and O'Connell, probably equal to the best halfback combination the coach produced, and I just trailed them everywhere, and when they broke through, your Uncle Dickie was right next to them to take the ball, and I scored the points, got the credit, and they done all the hard work.
A new word came into the vocabulary: the jitterbug. In 1946, the league's patron, Dr. Bert Evett, managed to get a British team passage to Australia aboard the aircraft carrier Indomitable. War-weary fans welcomed the Gus Risman-led side, and the first Australian-England test in 12 years drew a vast crowd to the SCG. An early sensation when Jack Kitching is sent off. England's heavyweight prop, Frank Whitcomb, scores. Then a lovely dummying try to centre Ron Bailey. The result, an 8-all draw. The second test drew an overflow crowd of more than 40,000 to Brisbane's exhibition ground. It was England's day. A try to Bassett, one of 3 he scored. Then Australia fights back with a try to left winger Lionel Cooper. Late in the match, England hooker Joe Egan is sent from the field. But another try by Bassett 12 minutes from the end ensured a Great Britain victory, 14-5. The tourists then took the third test 20-7 in Sydney to secure the Ashes. By now, English clubs were pouncing, and with the temporary lifting of the poaching ban, their raids took away some of Australia's best young players. Australian and West second rower Arthur Clues was one who couldn't resist the tempting offers.
£750 for 5 years, signing on fee, and £7 to win, £6 to draw, £5 a lot. Well, Spanker Mill said, we're going to give you £5 a match, Cluesy, win, lose, you know, and build a team around you. I said, no, you're not Spanker. I said, I'm going to Leeds.
Balmain fought their way down a tough road of sudden death matches before defeating St George 13-12 in the grand final of 46. In 1947, there was new blood in the competition. A team from the seaside, Manly, whose skipper was the good-looking Max Whitehead, later famous as the man in the chesty Bond ads. The other team was Parramatta, coached by Frank McMillan. There were some significant gains for South Sydney. The arrival of the Ironman forward, Jack Rayner. And Johnny Graves, the flying winger from the Hunter district, seen here in full flight playing for New South Wales. Souths were deeply impressed with the performance of a young country seconds fullback. They moved swiftly to sign Clive Churchill. Fans thrilled to the form of the New South Wales team of 47. How's this for a try by lightning-fast winger Johnny Bliss? Joe Jorgensen, who had left Balmain to captain coach June E, returned for one first-grade game, the grand final, and inspired a 13-9 Tigers win over Canterbury, scoring all his team's points. Balmain's Harry Barth was poached by Barrow, but later joined Warrington to play alongside the freakish wingman and try-scoring machine Brian Bevan. 1948, and a tough home series for the Len Smith-captained Australian side against the Kiwis. The first test in Sydney, and after conceding a 13-0 start, New Zealand bounced back to snatch a 21-19 victory. But Australia levelled the series by winning in Brisbane 13-4. It was after this game that there came what was arguably the greatest selection blunder in league history. The decision to leave New South Wales and Australian captain Len Smith out of the Kangaroo touring team to England was unexplained and unforgivable. Len Smith, after years of dignified silence, speaks out.
They wanted a Mason to captain the side, as I believe Mason captained every side before they went to England. The peculiar part of it is that I'm a very weak old Catholic.
The 48 Roos departed under the captaincy of West Col Maxwell. In the post-war years of strict food rations, the team faced the problem of getting sufficient nutritious food. Wally O'Connell remembers the basic diet of spuds and Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts, I don't want to see another one. We were allowed 10 worth of meat per week, per person, which was not much when you think of it for 7 days, so we were reminded after whinging a few times that that's what their rations are and they were living on it.
In the opening test at Headingley, Great Britain ran in 7 tries to 5, winning narrowly 23-21. The remaining tests were more convincing for the home side. In the wake of the tour, Clive Churchill was offered an unprecedented £10,000 to play for Workington Town, but the International Board refused him a clearance. In '48, West won the Premiership final 8-5 over the Tigers. The following year, St George produced a whirlwind finish to down Balmain in the Premiership final. Here, Matt McCoy scores for St George. After their 18-7 win, St George were involved in a fierce mud battle with Souths in the grand final the following Saturday. Saints triumphed 19-12, with Noel Pitting one of the stars. In late 1949, the weather went mad. A record freeze brought deep snow to the Blue Mountains. Gales and rainstorms lashed Sydney and the coastline. The big wet carried over into the following year and had a very special impact on Australian Rugby League.